everybody, today we're going to be making fresh vegan tagliatelle pasta. I'm Maxwell, this is Maxwell Bates, and so let's get into the video. Okay, so now we're going to start with 300 grams of all-purpose flour. Ideally you would use like a 00, but we don't have that. And so we're just going to pour it into the stand mixer. You can do this by hand, but it's a lot of work and effort and it takes a lot longer, so this makes everything so much. Then what we're going to do is we're going to make a little like hole in the middle, just like you would in traditional pasta dough making. You're going to make like a little spot to put your water in. Now we have here 300 grams of water. What you want to do is do half the amount of water you did flour, and you'll seem really dry at first, but work it some and then it will come together. You'll see. Okay, so we're just going to pour it in, and then we just lower it with the dough hook attachment on it, and then lock your KitchenAid in if you have one of them. KitchenAids work really well. And then we're just going to bring it up to speed 1 to first, or the lowest speed you have, to just slowly integrate the ingredients so the flour doesn't go everywhere. Okay, so now it's kind of pulling apart and lumpy sort of thing. It's going to be sticky on the top, but what you're going to want to do is pull the dough off the top of the dough hook and back into in here, and then close it again, and then lock. We're gonna bring the speed up to 2. Now we're just letting it mix. It's gonna take a little bit. When the motor starts really struggling, you know when it's just getting ready to put on the cutting board, or if you're working on a like traditional countertop, you can do it on a countertop. Just make sure that you clean the countertop really well. If you're doing it on a table, it should be shaking the table very vigorously. Okay, so now it's getting there. You don't have to keep on stopping it. The only time you have to stop is the first time, but to show you guys, it's getting there. You want it to have a consistency of like tacky Play-Doh, if you've ever used that or had that. This is still needing some kneading, so I'm just gonna lock it back down and turn it back on. We're gonna end up turning up the speed to number 4. If this happens to you, where the dough starts coming up above it, just push it down below and then continue mixing. Nice thing about this dough is once you get it all incorporated, you don't really have any goopy fingers from doing it. It would make it really difficult to knead by hand, but that's why we have a stand mixer. Okay, so now you can see it's starting to become shinier. When it gets shiny, and then just like when you take Play-Doh out, we're gonna take it out and knead it by hand for a little bit. But see how it's shaking the table a little bit? We're getting it ready. It's almost there. You can, another way is you can see it turning much smoother. And so we're just gonna turn it back on and just let it keep doing its thing, saving you from a really intensive upper arm workout, an upper body workout. So now we're going to turn it up. So now you can hear it having a more difficult time, and it's shaking around. So now we're going to turn it off and knead it by hand. So turn it down, unlock it, bring it back up. It's much less sticky now. It's much more like Play-Doh. And so now we're going to take some flour and just flour your working surface and then rub your hands around it to spread it. You could use a sifter, but I find this works just fine. And so now we're done with this. So put that down there. And now we are just going to knead this together. And we're just going to knead. We're just working on developing the gluten in here. If you want, you can pull it together in the center, and then it'll make you'll eventually get a nice taut ball, and it'll keep the surface nice and taut. Or you can do the traditional roll, and then flip, roll, roll. Because this dough is much drier than other pasta dough is. You want to have it lower than you so you can put your weight into it. Use your upper body, not just your arms, because then you won't get as tired out. If you use your upper body weight, it's much easier to knead the dough than if you have to just use your arms. Because if you're using your arms, you have to really work at it. But if you use your upper body weight and lean into it, it's much easier. It requires a lot less effort. And then if you want, you can throw an elbow into it. If you want, if your arms or your upper body is getting tired, use your elbow occasionally. So now we're just folding the dough into itself, making the ball round. You push in with this hand, and then you stick the dough in with your thumb. This way, it gets you a nice taut surface. And then, when you're ready, you can either roll it out now, but it's gonna be a little difficult, and you still have to cut up it into portions. Or what we're gonna do is we're gonna let this sit. You can let it sit for 30 minutes to an hour, or do it within 10 minutes. Just the more you let it sit, the more it'll relax. But if you don't cover it with something like a cloth, it'll dry out. So cover it with a cloth, or you can wrap it in cling film, but I always have a problem with it sticking. So the cover with the cloth method works much better for me. Okay, so we'll see you in a little bit. Hello everybody, we're back. The dough is all rested, and so we're going to take the cover off of it and fold the top over. We're going to need this for later. Then take it out of the bowl, dust off the excess flour on the top, and now we're going to roll it into a ball. So we're going to take a nice sharp knife. Sharp is important. And we are also going to be using a scale for weighing out our dough. So I'm going to place it on the scale. I have it on the grams measurement. Put the dough on there. It is 900 grams. So what you're going to want to do is split that into 4 sections. Or another way of doing it is cut down the middle. Put your hand on this side and then rock, and it should split apart, and then rock, And if you did it correctly, they should have divided in divisible quantity. If it's within 10 grams each one is 10 grams off, you can, it's just fine. So they're all about around the 225 grams mark. And so now we're going to roll each one of these into a ball. And you won't need this. So you can put that away. And you can do it by hand, where you do like the pull and then in the middle thing. And the dough is much easier to work with now because it's been rested. And it'll get you a nice tight ball like this. Or you can do the other way of working with it is just kind of get the outside well covered in flour, and then what you're going to want to do is roll them against each other. It works better if they're a little sticky, but if you roll them against each other, then they stay nice and even. This is a trick I picked up from Paul Hollywood from Great British Bake Off, from the Masterclass series. And it works very well, in my opinion. And that way you're also doing two balls at the same time. Or you can do the more traditional roll in your hand method. But I personally like the roll against each other. And so you have two nice, pretty dough balls that we're going to put over here on ceramic dish. Make sure you flour the bottom of it and put your balls right there. And we're going to grab the other two and do the same thing we did previous to the last one. Okay, so now we have them all done. So now what we're going to do is just cover them with a floury towel. You can use the same one you were using earlier. So we're just going to put it on the table, grab some flour, and shake it down. You can use one with a linty section. You just have to use more flour. Ideally, you would have a more flat tea towel, or a Kush would work also for this. Or you could just wrap them in cling film. I find most of the time that they stick that way. So we're just going to cover this and just kind of like wrap them in the corners. You want to prevent as much air from getting to them as possible so they don't dry out. So we're going to transfer them over here to this bowl right over here. And then oopsie there, guys. Forgot the handle. That's important. Okay, we're going to put the handle in here. Okay, and another trick is use a wet paper towel underneath so it doesn't slide around as much, because if you don't want to have to use a clamp to clamp it down to your table, because it might damage your table if you clamp. It has rubber feet, but just this way you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so we're going to have it on the largest setting, which for this is 1, and we're just going to flatten it with our palm. Make sure it's thoroughly covered in flour, and we're just going to roll it through the machine. What we're doing is we're laminating the dough. Okay, so now we're going to grab it and flour our working surface thoroughly. And it's okay if you get flour on you. It comes off really easily. And now we're going to flour our dough again. So it's better to err on the side of caution, put a little too much flour on there than not enough. But you don't want big clumps if ideally. But if it gets all like sticky and bumpy, just means you need to laminate it more. So what we're gonna do is fold over the edges into the middle, and then fold the sides over. And now we're gonna stick it back through our machine. Okay, so now we're just gonna fold it over again itself, but this time we're folding it over the side that we folded it against previously. And then we're gonna fold that one more time over top. And we're gonna run it through again. Okay, so you can see it's coming together much more. You can't see the lines as much. I'm gonna fold it over one more time. But this time we're gonna be doing the fold over this way, and then we're gonna run it through the machine. If you drape it across the back, then you don't have to hold it. Okay, so it's getting a bit long now, so what I'm gonna do is take your knife. You can leave it as it is, or you can cut it in half. Doesn't have to be super precise, and then put the extra half in your dish for right now. And we're gonna flour this half on the top again, and run it through one more time. And then one more time. Okay, so now the lines on the thing are basically all gone. And so what we're gonna do is a little trick I figured out. Top tip, take a rolling pin, one with movable internal one that spins around like two handles, and you're gonna want something that you can hold on to. And so you're gonna bring it through the machine, and then to about halfway, and then what you're gonna wanna do is take one side of it and then the other side of it and pinch them together so that they join up. So then they're one piece of dough. Make sure you pinch the top and bottom of each section of your conjoining set. Then we're gonna put our rolling pin right here, and then we're just gonna roll it by holding in the rolling pin, and just slowly it's gonna get longer and longer. Dough by a little bit. And then eventually we're gonna, once this is smooth again like it was during the lamination, we're going to bring the size all the way up to number 5 at one notch at a time. And see, this way you don't have to deal with re-putting it back through and feeding it and having it get stuck. It's much more difficult. This is much more helpful in necessary when you get to thinner sheets, especially when you get to like things for like stuffed pasta. When it's so thin you can see your hand through it basically, that's when it's really especially important. But you can also, if you want, since you're on a double roller, roll it back and forth if you want to cheat a little, but just be careful that you're not stretching it too much. Okay, so now the top and bottom side pieces have conjoined together. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to set this down on the table, and we're going to bring it up to number 2. We're going to continue rolling, and we're going to roll a couple times around in number 2, and then we're going to move on to number 3. Okay, so now we're going to set this down and move on to number 3. Okay, so now we're going to move on to number 4. So we're going to set this down and move it to number 4. And now we're one away from our final thickness. And see how the rolling pin is much further away now? Okay, so now we're going to set this down, and we're going to move on to our final thickness, which is number 5. And so we're going to roll it a couple times through number 5. It's much thinner. You can actually see your fingers through it just slightly. And we're going to take the rolling pin and slowly bring it down to the table. And then we're going to take our knife and cut the dough in half. And since it's floured thoroughly, they won't stick to each other, or they shouldn't. And so now what we're going to do is move this over here, and then take our strips of dough over here and cut one more time. And we're going to place them in the coop in here. Okay, so now we're going to do the other piece of dough. And one circle should give you about one medium-sized plate of pasta. Keep in mind, now this is oil-free, so it's much lower in calories than pasta with oil in it. It's still just as tasty. Now we're going to take it and run it through the machine again. Move it a little further down and do the same pinchy. Give it a little bit more flour. And we're going to put the rolling pin in. And we're going to do the rolling pin thing. And if this happens to you, where it's thicker on one side than the other, just fold in the sides and then pinch it and then continue rolling. And it'll just make it slightly longer amount that you're careful to be watching both sides and not pulling the rolling pin too hard, but giving enough tension so it stays somewhat taut. You want it just like slightly droopy. So not like that, not like this where it's like pulling on it, but not like that where it's tons of room. So just where it's like a hammock where it's laying on it. There's like a little curve in it. Okay, so now we're almost done. Is you can see it's almost towards the end of the cutting board. Cut. A little bit of flour. You're gonna want to flour these, and then once you flour them, you can put other ones on top in the middle section. Okay, so now we're gonna take the last one and roll it out just like the other ones. If you don't have a rolling pin, you can use your hands. Just make sure you use the back side of your hand, because it won't stick as much as the front side will. You just have to slowly move it back and forth. Rolling pin trick. Okay, so now we're gonna cut this and put it in here. Now that we have all our pasta right here, we're gonna take our strip that we just finished rolling. Just make sure that when you're rolling it, we're going to take the handle and bring it, and we're going to use the cutting attachment on this. This is what gets you those nice, pretty, perfect noodles. Fly it over the other side, and just grab it with your hand, and see you get these nice, pretty noodles. If they stick, because I like it thinner, so if you are a little thicker, they'll fall apart much easier, but they don't really stick that much right now. So you just pull them apart. If you don't want to have to pull them apart, use setting number 4, and then just toss them in a little flour and set them to the side of your cutting board, and take your next piece and do the same thing. Okay, so now we're going to set it down. A little flour. Grab another sheet and move them to the side. If you want to store these, put them in a container with a little flour in your freezer, and then you'll have fresh pasta ready to go. When you take it out of the freezer, and just put it in some hot boiling water. It should only take like 90 seconds or less, or when the pasta comes up to the top of the water forcefully. But in my experience, I find that we like it so much that it doesn't last that long in the freezer. But be a great meal prep idea. Little flour, toss them into a little nest, and then take your next strip, little flour, pull it apart. Okay, so we have them all done, and now you can just do the rest of them, the rest of these, or stick them in the freezer or refrigerator. I would use them within like the next 2 days. Make sure you wrap them in cling film or parchment paper. So I'm Max. This is Maxwell Bates, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click the little bell icon so you don't miss any future videos. Leave your comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video.